in the Vinaya, which is one of the books of the Tripitaka that deals with the rules and regulations for ordained, for the Buddhist Sangha, he is asked by his disciples what language they should teach they should share his teachings in. And what that refers to is that at the time of the Buddha, nearly 3,000 years ago, in that part of the world, and actually in any part of the world, the language groups were very distinctly separate, and there were many, 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 many of them, most of which have disappeared. But the kingdoms that are referred to in the Pali Canon, each of them had their own language. And some of those languages were mutually understandable, and some weren't. So you might at times hear Shakespearean English, and it might take a while to adjust to be able to understand it. And so that would be the case in a number of languages at the Buddhist time. And then there were other languages that belong to different language families. So this was a question to him about skillful means. How do we transmit your teaching? Should we insist that anybody who's going to learn about what you have to share needs to know this language? His response at the time was, teach people in their own language. And that's really what we do still. I heard a terrific presentation recently by a linguist who talked about the development of all of the different languages through which the Dharma has filtered down to us. And it is so clear how complex the question of what the Tathagata's true teaching was. Whatever we decide, we also have a very, very different cultural lens through which we hear the teachings, and a different set of circumstances, conditions, very different. The conditions are very different now. And yet the heart of the teaching has to do with that which is not conditioned, which runs through all conditions, which is that everything is impermanent. Everything is interdependently arising continually. There's no fixity of self. And, when you look into the biological makeup of this flesh body, we are composed of millions and millions and millions of organisms. And then we are conscious. And we simplify the whole matter and call ourselves me and identify as one body. So the question then, what does skillful means, and how do we use this one body, this one body mind, in a way that's beneficial, which was his message. We awaken to live as a human being in the best way, in a way that is true to our conditions and to our true situation, which is we are interdependent. We are interdependently arising. We do live, we are one mind in many, many ways, one heart. And not to live as though we're not. So we often run into a lot of confusion about the teachings and how they're to be applied to our everyday life. And we confuse the teachings about the absolute nature of all phenomena with the teachings on handling the practicalities of everyday life. And the teachings include all of that. and they are not separate, and they are not opposed to each other. So there are many levels of meaning, and there are of the teachings, and there are many levels of our own life. We are complexity embodied. Even though there are so many levels, we are called on all the time to respond to situation after situation. And we have many different means, skillful means offered by this practice in order to apply our wisdom to daily life. And we have to discern the particulars. We have to be aware of all the particulars that go into it. So even so, it's not always possible to know what will result from any action that we take. So you might wait for the walk sign to cross the street, and you have a pretty good chance that you'll get to the other side. But maybe that's the one time that someone is texting and doesn't stop. These things happen. So there are so many unknowns at any time because we are interdependent and arising. And we all have our own independent mind stream going all the time. Probably this talk is being heard as many different talks. And there are all kinds of commentaries going on in this room that I don't know about. I always assume that that's true. So we assume that what we do will lead to an expected outcome. But all of us, I'm sure, have examples of when that hasn't been the case. And that could happen on a daily basis. It's amazing. You wake up in the morning thinking the day is going to bring one set, and almost immediately it starts to turn in its own directions. We just don't know. We don't know who we will meet. Yesterday, I was, after the breakfast, I had gone for a walk, and I thought, just at the last moment, I thought, oh, I'll just go back and grab my dish before I go. I had another meeting. Oh, this was after that other meeting I had to go to. So I came back here, and as I was getting out of the car behind me was just pulling out and stopped and backed up, and the person jumped out, and I thought, oh my God, did I hit him? And it turned out to be somebody I haven't seen in like 25 years who had come by. His wife was at a meeting at OSU. He wanted to see the Zendo, so he had come and he'd be kind of peeking into the windows. That was such an interesting moment because I wasn't planning on coming back here. And it was just at that moment, he was just about to leave, I was just arriving. So we just don't know what's going on. We think we do. So this is why we encourage us all to live with don't know mind, to remember at every moment that we just see a very, very small set of everything that is unfolding. And we don't know where we are in all of that. Don't know mind is a hard-won practice. It comes from right effort. It comes from great determination, and it comes from long experience. We all forget that we don't know, and then we are reminded, oh yeah, I don't know. And so it becomes a part of the flow of from which we can use skillful means in our life. We always know it. At some point, we're going to be called on to apply our wisdom and our whole self and heart to whatever we're given, whatever comes along our way. How are we going to handle it? We have a lot of tools in this practice to help us. but we don't necessarily know, even if we do our very best, how things are going to turn out. They may not be quite what we wished for. They may surpass what we wished for or expect. So that's what we refer to as maintaining a wide view. Don't know mine as a wide view. Or what Hemachodron calls the wisdom of uncertainty. And this is a view that underlies skillful means. Because we're always planting seeds in our daily life, in our actions, by our actions. And when we're at peace and our minds are pretty stable and open, we're more likely to see more accurately what we're being met with, and clear about what seeds we will plant with our responses. We can be much more intentional about what we want to contribute. And remember our vow, our bodhisattva vow, remembering our intention. So in Zen, we don't talk about sin, but we do talk about skillful and unskillful action. Using this term and this approach, skillful, helps us maintain our self-compassion. So when we screw up, we can say, oh, that wasn't so skillful. What can I learn? What happened there? And that contributes to how we go from there. But if we haven't kind of a grabbed on perpetual view of sin and doing bad and wrong, then we can't learn anything from what we do. And we feel bad. It kind of undermines our ability to relax and be open and live from faith mind, live from an open heart, the heart that trusts our own capacity. So, skillful means requires a wider, open view and don't know mind, and a commitment to be of benefit. In Zazen, applying this to Zazen, we might initially find that the right practice, the skillful means in Zazen, is breath counting. That might actually be very skillful. And it can help us settle down, it can help us focus, and it can even help us notice that we are breathing. We're all old hands at this, so that sounds silly, but if you remember back, or if you know that so many people don't even realize that they're breathing, and what the breath encompasses, what it's capable of, how freely offered it is. When we discover through right practice, wide awareness on the cushion, the skillful thing is to let go of counting, because it has functioned in a way that was necessary and helpful, and is no longer necessary. So we can let go of that. Trust a wider process to unfold naturally. So skillful means we apply it to meditation and also to our daily activities. It's a term that describes how we use our body, how we use our speech, and how we use our thoughts. And it's not always possible to know what the fruits are going to be of our actions. It's not necessary. We're talking about process. We're very process oriented. That's what we are responsible for. That's where we have choices. So our practice is to be aware and to recognize when we're distracted, when we're not all here. Maybe part of us is here and part of us is 40 years ago, or tomorrow. Their states of mind can be really dense and absorbing, and they can involve us in very strong emotion. So we have a whole set, probably most of us know, emotion thinking, which is not just thinking. It's not thinking clearly like contemplation is clear thinking, right? So the mind has so many different weather fronts, so many different ways of manifesting, of being used. And going through a day with all kinds of images in the mind, in front of our mind's eye, can blind us to what is actually in front of our eye. We can be caught up in greed and desire and resentment, hostility, fear, or just in their feelings of distress, kind of the generalized feelings of distress and stress. And at times like this, we can make mistakes in judgment. Sometimes there are very small consequences, like grabbing for salt instead of sugar when you're making a cake. That's annoying, but there it is. But sometimes the consequences are really, really major, and not just in the immediate moment, but in long term. They have long-term consequences. So the other day I was talking with my daughter, who was told me, she said she just had to tell somebody about what had just happened because she was still shaking from it. She'd been driving on MLK in Portland, 3 lanes, traffic going about 30 miles an hour, and a car pulled out going the wrong way and right in front of her. And so she slammed on the brakes, and the car, instead of stopping and backing off, veered, sped up across 3 lanes of traffic, with a lot of cars crashing into it, and it went off up a side street. So who knows what happened to that car. And I was just so struck by how that's such an example of being so caught up. I mean, that driver, we can assume what was going on through that driver's mind. One of the things was, get out of here as fast as you can. And there was not an awareness, a slightly wider awareness of everybody else who was involved in that particular situation. I hope they're okay. Who knows what they thought was going on? And fortunately, nobody was physically hurt. So it's really valuable to be able to be aware, to know when we are distracted. And it helps us strengthen our ability to be skillful in responding to our actual immediate circumstances. There's this phrase in Zen that is turning on a dime. And one of the things that always is part of a training center is suddenly things will be decided differently and everybody has to adapt. I don't do that too much here, but sometimes I do it. It's helpful. It's helpful to see how grabbed on to a particular direction and how hard it is just to turn on a dime when needed. A dime is a very small spot. It's quite. I wonder where that phrase came from initially, huh? Turning on a dime. And that's part of skillful means. To disinvest immediately when necessary from the mind's fond notions or the directions that we're traveling or the speed that we're traveling. So this is skillful means clearly seeing conditions as they are, being awake to all dharmas. Sometimes you're on a street and there is no car to be seen, but you can hear the approaching car, right? But if you're not all there, you can not hear something that could be dangerous. There are so many instances of what we don't notice that we are immediately going to be affected by, or we are going to affect others because of. So having a don't know mind helps us be at the ready for life, and frees us to be creative and deeply grounded in compassion, because when we're really paying attention, we are concerned about the effects of anything that we do on everyone else. And that's the heart of compassion. The heart of compassion is seeing things the way they are and acting accordingly. That's compassion. So I think about child rearing and parenting. There are a few people here who have gone through that. And we are called on, or any kind of helping out anybody else learn something. But we're caught, I'm thinking about one of my kids who had big feelings in relation to things. And it was very important to recognize the particular age that she was at, what was going on for her, and what would be helpful to respond for her, to help her learn about how to stop and breathe. You know, it's one of the things that we base timeouts. Timeouts are all about helping somebody learn how to stop and breathe and calm down before sorting out what's needed, whether we are 3 or 30 or 80. So we're called on to really be able to be skillful and recognize the true nature of whatever it is that we need to deal with. Taking a breath in a close relationship can help strengthen the bond. So let's say you have a big blow up between you, and cooling off allows both members of a relationship to just calm down, get out of emotion thinking, and be able to look at what is the problem here and what would help, what would settle it, or even just to be able to listen, right? So that can be very helpful in relationship. That can be very skillful. On the other hand, that same taking a break in some relationships works the opposite. It leads to alienation because there's never coming back. There's never a coming back and working it out and owning what's going on. There's never an ability to be really truthful and open. So bringing clear awareness to our agendas, we can free ourselves and others from them. That's part of the meaning of the first of the beings are numberless. I vow to free them from my own agendas. And first we have to be able to look at them and know them. Everyone has their own version about what's happening. And appreciating the multitude of conditions that create a situation is really important. Because sometimes just stopping and watching for a while is what's needed, is skillful. But we don't always have the opportunity for that. Sometimes we have to respond immediately. We just do our best. And that's where precepts are so helpful. when we're called on, we know what we really have deepened our understanding of what kinds of conditions lead to our own unskillfulness with speech or with action. So we can exercise patience when patience is needed. And we can use generosity when that's helpful. And withholding when that's helpful. We can exercise kindness even when we find a situation challenging. So you see the direct connection between skillful means and spacious mind, which is what meditation is so, Zazen is sitting in spacious mind. And what happens when we sit in Zazen? We notice that our minds are not particularly spacious. They're filled with stuff. That's really important to see it, to work with it. The more awake we are, the less attached we are to our own views, the more ready we are able to respond in situations and know or intend what would be most beneficial. The precepts, the pure precepts are to, the first one is to refrain from doing harm. And the second one is to do good. Whatever that is. It's a basic intention, to be beneficial. And the third is to do good for others, to include all beings. How do we know what would be harmful in a situation? How do we know what would be skillful? We don't, basically. We do our best. We hold the intention. An example of complexity, of course, is the current situation in the Middle East, when there are so many forces and strongly held views and necessities and ancient pain inflicted from every direction. No matter what we do, we can cause harm. So quieting the situation in any way we can see to do it might be skillful. But maybe this is a situation where strong action would be needed to quiet the situation. This is definitely a don't know situation. And it's really, if you look at the discussions that are going on at the levels, of the policy levels, this is what it's all about, is strong action or not? What would quiet it down? It's very hard to know because there are so many different agendas in all of this. So we need to be willing to let in the complexity of the world, even though personally we practice simplicity. Just because personally we recognize the ease that living more simply brings, doesn't mean we criticize those who don't recognize that yet and are caught up. It's our own self-care, it's our own way of living skillfully in a world that is overwhelmed by stuff. So one last aspect of this is the middle way teachings. The Buddha taught the middle way as the recognition of opposites and extremes in our own thinking. That to be aware of when we're setting up two opposing ends of something, we can be setting up a situation that keeps us from being able to be skillful. And there are just so many examples of that, but you can look into your own tomorrow, look as you go through the day tomorrow, what are the opposites that are arising here? What are the choices that are being made? What is the narrowing that happens around those choices? Middle way teaching emphasizes the larger context within which skillful means can arise. So I hope this is helpful in emphasizing this sense of what to pay attention to when you're trying to figure out a way to bring practice into your everyday life. And to think, to really contemplate, what are your basic commitments? What are the precepts that you live by? And be guided by them when situations come up that are a little confounding. Thank you.
Page 5.